Hey everyone, and welcome back to Market Like a Mother. Today we have a little bit of a different episode. I'm sitting down to talk to Karen, founder and CEO of Radiant Marketing. And before this call that we have today, I actually sent her over a request to send me the top mistakes that she made when she was getting started as a business owner. And today we're kind of going to take a closer look at each of those and hopefully have some takeaways that other founders could learn to avoid these mistakes in the future. So are you ready to get into it, Karen?
Yes, let's do this. Excited to share my
No
mistakes, to
pressure.
put them out there to the world.
I know, I'm like, it was a kind of a hot topic question I sent you. I'm getting started. So, looking at your first agency, you took your finger off the pulse of your finances. What happened there?
Yeah, so I think that, and this kind of combines with another question that you sent, which is the importance of understanding, what you're doing within your agency or your organization, especially if you're going into something with more than just yourself. But I think that a lot of times we shy away from the numbers, and especially creatives or creative agencies, but also service providers who are like really focused on and good at what they do. The business stuff can get, pushed to the wayside, and the last thing you want to do is push the finances out of your mind to the point where you have to come back and say, whoa, like what happened here? And I think what's nice, when you're getting started, is you can like change, pivot, flex a lot of things quickly. It's harder to do that as you grow and you have more expenses and you have more people. So if you're able to pay close attention to the finances and see, the key performance metrics from a business perspective that are how they're trending, where you're at, in the current state, I think that gives you a really good idea of how you can grow, what you might need to change. And in some cases, business is tough right out the gate, and you're not necessarily going to be making everything you need to make to cover all of your costs. And if you're seeing that you're consistently in the red, then that might be a flag for you to adjust even like your own pay. And not that that's something I'm like, yeah, let's just cut our own pay as soon as we can. But like if you're noticing that you're just digging yourself into a bigger hole and you've taken out a line of credit or you're racking up the credit cards, then you definitely want to make sure you're making changes. And if you're not paying attention to the numbers, then obviously you're going to miss that.
Now, I kind of want to go into that moment too, where you maybe had that realization of like, oh my gosh, like, I need to pivot, what's going on with the finances here? Because I think a lot of founders maybe get stuck in like, what next? So could you kind of take us into that moment too of like, what's the first thing you did when you realized like, okay, I took my finger off the pulse here and like things are not going how I want them to go?
Yeah, well, I feel like I can't talk about this without talking about the fact that my first agency, I did end up dissolving. I had a business partner
Hmm.
and it just didn't work out for a variety of reasons. But one of them was like a financial reason. And we had dug such a big hole. I had been disconnected from that process for too long and hadn't realized where we were at. And so when I was kind of getting reacquainted with the numbers, I realized that like what we were doing was not sustainable, and it was to a point where we really couldn't continue as we were. So we had to make some really tough decisions, and we did decide to part ways, dissolve the business, and kind of start new things in fresh directions, which honestly was one of the most challenging things I've ever had to go through. It was sad, it was hard, it felt like I was failing. But in retrospect, and like seeing what that opened up for me, it was one of the best possible things that could have happened.
I feel like a big takeaway there, which kind of leads us into our next question too, is like having clear defined roles, within the agency or, as a founder, and for you as basically a co-founder there, they could make or break that partnership like they did in your case. Can you kind of speak a little bit more to that and kind of having those defined roles, whether you're a co-founder or, a solopreneur, like we talk about a lot here?
Yeah, so solopreneurs, you're everything, right? You're all the roles. We talked about
Yeah.
that on the
Yeah.
last
Everything
episode.
and everything.
Yeah, so that one's a little easier. Do all the things. But in
Yeah.
partnerships, it is so challenging. And this is like, I can smile about it now, not because it was easy or there was anything funny or fun about it, but it was kind of, it was a very humbling moment when I realized that our partnership wasn't working and we needed to part ways, because going into it, we were like on cloud nine, right? We're like so excited about this business. We both had very similar visions. We like really wanted to serve, and we loved being in the health space. So there was so many positives. There was like such great energy. And everyone was like, this isn't going to work. Partnerships fail. You got to like reconsider. And we were like, not us. We've got this. And unfortunately, I think one of the biggest mistakes we made that did end up ultimately ending the partnership is that we were not crystal clear on what each of our roles were. We didn't have a conversation that like walked through, okay, on a day-to-day basis, what are you going to be doing and what am I going to be doing at a bigger scale? And like from an organizational standpoint, like what am I responsible for? What metrics are like a result of my work and what are a result of your work? And so there was, a lot of crossover. There was a lot of things that didn't get done. And if we had done that, I think there's a much better chance that we could have succeeded in that partnership. And so that, I mean, if you're considering a partnership right now, 100% make sure you sit down and have like crystal clear clarity around what each of you is going to do, and that like you are agreeing to then on the value that you're bringing to your company. Because if you don't have that defined, I feel like there's a lot of resentment can build up, or you're kind of like comparing what's being done. But if you're clear about that up front, then it just helps to like pave the road for a much easier, more successful and transparent partnership.
I feel like that is so important because I feel like in the media too, you constantly hear about, partnership drama. Like we even see it in the podcast world of, two people starting a podcast together and the partnership not working out. So I feel like that's such good advice for anyone who's like kind of looking into building something with someone else. Super, super important for sure.
So Lauren,
I want to kind of pivot.
I know that you're a solopreneur, but I'm curious, if you were to have a business partner, what would you want that business partner to do?
I thought you were about to be like, what happens if
Oh,
our podcast partnership doesn't work? I was like, uh-oh. I was like, are you trying to tell me something? Is this not working? I was like, everyone but us. This doesn't happen to us. But, sorry, kind of going back to what you asked. Obviously, I'm a solopreneur. But I've had my experience in this as well with partnering too early with like influencer management agencies and ending up in kind of tough partnerships. When I was first starting out, every offer I got to have management, to have representation seemed so exciting, and I wanted to work with everyone. And I ended up in deals where I was losing 30-40% on brand deals that I was doing for not reading contracts carefully, for just falling into bad partnerships. So I think too, kind of going into almost like a representation or working with like a higher up company too, as a entrepreneur, it's so important to kind of keep that in mind too, and make sure roles are defined, rules are defined, exactly what you're getting into, and just being careful overall. I feel like that's a big takeaway too, is just to like really be aware of what you're getting into before you start.
yeah, I think it's like balancing like that excitement and passion, like you were saying, and kind of similar to my story,
Yeah.
with like the practicalities and the reality of things and the contracts and the legal language and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, Lauren, but I'm a very passionate, excitable person. And so I tend to lean into that. And
Yeah. To give the audience a behind the scenes, like I feel like Karen and I, whenever we have our monthly one-on-ones where we check in, like it's just us like so excited about something and going back and forth, and we have to reel ourselves down to earth and be like, okay, next steps. Like let's talk about, next steps, what we're doing, because we both, I think we're both very optimistic too, which is, it's something that could end up hurting you in a partnership. So, being focused on reality and kind of like seeing things for as they are is good too. I feel like that's a good takeaway from what you shared.
Mhm.
But I do want to pivot a little bit into, kind of going past now. Your first agency has dissolved. This partnership that you were in, has dissolved, and now you're in your first agency. You're in Radiant. You're getting started. You're, what we have now and what we've built. You've talked about in the past that you've hired too fast and fired too slow. So what could you kind of teach other founders from this lesson that you've learned in your 10 plus years now building Radiant?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of just spoke to it too with like the management companies and hiring that. Like you kind of get excited and sometimes don't necessarily do all of your due diligence. And so I think, as solopreneurs. So, starting Radiant in 2015, I started as a solopreneur, no partners. And so I was kind of going back to just doing everything myself. And we're so busy that we can try to skip through some of the details sometimes because we're just trying to manage it all. And when it comes to hiring, like, you don't want to skip those steps. Like, you definitely want to do your due diligence and make sure you're hiring someone that both has, some level of the skills you need, depending on depending on what you already are staffed with, like if it's someone that needs to be at a very high level or if it's someone you think you can kind of train up on those skills. I think having a base foundation there is important, but I don't think they have to be a super expert either. I think those are oftentimes trainable things. And then also, like, if they'll be a cultural fit, like, are they going to fit into like the culture that you're trying to create? Again, maybe they're your first hire, so you're not like totally sure what that culture is like, but if it's something that resonates with you as a solopreneur, if they're aligned with your values, I think those are all important questions to ask. And some of that doesn't come from those first few conversations. Like, you definitely want to call references and get an understanding of how they interacted with other teammates or managers in previous roles. And it's so interesting because anyone that hires that plays a role in hiring has likely seen that even the people we're picking to be our references on our resumes. So, like, really the people that are like, say only positive things about me, you're going to be my reference.
Yeah.
Like, they'll reveal things that are very interesting that aren't necessarily positive. And like, I think, usually they're saying them in a way, like, luckily they're being transparent and wanting to kind of share their whole full experience with the candidate. But those reference calls can be very enlightening. So definitely do the reference calls. Get at least two people that aren't just friends of theirs to have a conversation with you. And then you could also do some sort of, like, if it makes sense, like a working interview. So if if you want to kind of trial them on a certain project, you pay for that time to get a sense of, like, can they actually do what they say they are? There's been a few roles we've hired over the years that people come in very confident and touting some very specific skills, and then come to find out they actually do not know the intricacies of the role and the details of what they should be doing. And it's a huge mismatch. So yeah.
That's okay. That's so interesting, especially about the references, because I'm like thinking back to now, like any single person I've ever listed as a reference on a job application, kind of from the other side as someone looking to get hired. So that's definitely a really interesting perspective to have on it. I want to talk about too firing. Obviously, like I've never really been in the position to have to fire someone or kind of dissolve someone's employment. Like how I guess I want to ask, like, how do you kind of maybe separate your feelings from being able to make those hard decisions as a founder? Because I just like, I feel like that's such a scary thing to do.
Yeah, totally. And I'm such an empathetic person, and I am such a sensitive person too. So I'm never you're never fully separating that out, but you can acknowledge that
Yeah.
someone is a fantastic person and not right for the job. And the faster you come to that realization and are able to, like, take actions to, like, move that in the direction it should, the better. Because I think the longer you have someone lingering in a role that is not meant for them, the more toxic that can become too. Because ultimately,
Yeah.
they're not happy in that role. If they're not doing a good job because they don't have the skill set, or again, maybe they're not a fit with the team, then it's just going to get worse and worse. It's going to build. It's going to drive down results. It's going to harm other relationships. It's potentially going to do damage within the team. So I definitely think it's important to address those things as early as possible, head on. Deploy, like, performance improvement plans, like talk specifically about what you want to see improving if there is an opportunity for something to improve. Of course, if it's like wild reasons that they need to be let go, then that might need to happen
Yeah.
immediately. But if it's like based on performance and such, then you can set up a plan to hopefully get them back on track. Check in when you say you're going to check in. If they're making progress towards it like they should be, then like there's a chance that they can kind of turn things around and it ends up being a good fit. But if not, then that's an even clearer indication, right? Like that now you need to stay with that and follow through with that plan. And if that means letting them go, then then you need to let them go. But I was just thinking too, because you said you've never been in a position to fire, with the, like, management companies you've worked with, the ones that haven't been good in the past.
Yeah.
How did you handle that?
I guess that's true. I kind of didn't think about it in that mindset. And now I'm like going back to that moment where I just had like so much anxiety because
Right.
I'm such a people pleaser. So I'm like, I like dread doing stuff like that. Yeah, I definitely had to send, some stern emails and get myself out of some contracts. I think what was helpful too is just talking to people who had been in my shoes, which I'm sure, you as a founder have done too, working with other women who own businesses and agencies. Like that definitely helped to almost like alleviate any feelings I had that I was being mean or I was being rude or
Hmm.
perceived in a way I didn't want to be perceived, and kind of separate how I was feeling from business, and make sure I was talking in a really clear, concrete manner that was, work appropriate. I wasn't kind of letting my emotions or feelings be woven into my communication, which kind of like you talked about too, kind of separating that. But it is hard. It's hard when you are sensitive and you're I'm definitely a people pleaser, and I really worry about kind of how I'm perceived. So it's definitely tricky, and I'm sure every founder has experienced that in some aspect of kind of dealing with unpleasantries when building a brand. Like it's kind of inevitable almost.
Yeah, I love what you say because I feel like it's such a common challenge is trying to separate out the idea of like getting business done and being mean
Yeah.
or nice, because I think it's so like it's
Yeah.
so hard, and maybe it's more just like as a woman, or and I'm sure there's men out there that feel the same
Yep.
way, but there's definitely different societal pressures that like as leaders we're held up to that are different than men in the same types of roles. But I think if you want to have a successful business, and if you want the other people on the team that are being affected by this, if you want your mental health to be stable and well, then I think it's like recognizing for sure that like this needs to be done, and it's not because I'm being mean. It's because like in a lot of the cases, right, like they're not doing their job or they're falling short of what they've their
Right.
deliverables require, and it's still like that little voice in the back of your head that's like, oh, but I feel bad. So yeah, that is like a perpetual
Yep.
challenge. And your point about the support system is so important. Whether that's like an advisor you have or other, colleagues or entrepreneurs in similar situations, or literally even like a mindset coach or a therapist. I think those are all super invaluable to growing your business and helping make hard decisions.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And now I'm thinking like we need to add an episode about like women being mean in business and like how to be mean
Yeah.
without being mean and be stern. That could be a topic in the future. But I want to go back to too something that you shared when I reached out to you about kind of doing this episode and talking about founder mistakes. And you had shared that by consciously managing thoughts, we influence words, actions, habits, and ultimately our destiny, which I loved. I totally you know aligned myself with that. But I want to talk about, have you learned this the hard way? What do you do now? And kind of how does this, what you shared manifest in your work life now?
Yeah, it's a never-ending journey, right? Like I think we improve in some of these skills as we practice them, but we're never perfect. And so I've had some really great mentors and business coaches like Carla Reeves and Kayla MacArthur that have helped me kind of shift my thinking and really empower myself to with tools to um, really just look at things differently. Because when I first started, and the story you now know about my first partnership dissolving, like that was a really rough time, that was a really hard experience, and like kind of got me down in the dumps in some ways. But of course I'm always excited about opportunity and what's next, and I think that like just shifting to make sure the majority of my thoughts and my focus is on the opportunity, on the learnings, and on what is available to me to grow, do, achieve, provide, serve. Because I think if you get stuck in those, the flip side of that, focused on the negative, oh, woe is me, then it just like it removes all your power. You're a victim of your own
Mm-hmm.
life, and I don't believe that. I believe we can, with the support of God or the universe, whatever you believe in, like you can really help to create your own future. You have a lot more power over your current circumstances, if not just your mindset in your current circumstances, right? Like you can have like the same exact day as another person, and you could see it as like this crappy day, focused on all the wrong things that went, the things that went wrong. And that other person can be looking at that day like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful day. The weather was perfect, and seeing all the positives. And like, that's something we get to decide. Every day we get to decide to have that mindset over the other. And that just feels so great. What about you?
I love that. I love that. And I like that was like a little positive boost for all of us today. I love that. I feel like when I hear you talk about mindset, like the biggest thing I think about of like how I practice this is like an abundance mindset in my daily life. Cause I used to get really almost like competitive and bummed out if I saw
Mm,
other people, getting opportunities that I wanted, or, "Oh, I wish I could get
mm,
that." And I had to like really see how it was affecting me. Like you said, it kind of affects your words, it affects your actions. It totally sets the tone for your whole day and your productivity. And I had to really make a conscious effort to switch to like, there's enough for everyone, there's enough opportunities.
yes.
Everyone, has the same opportunities. And just because someone gets one doesn't mean, that it was taken from you. There's always more out there. And like the universe, I think, does a really good job giving you what you want and what you ask for. So that was like a big thing I had to shift once I noticed it was affecting my day to day, was like kind of having that abundance mindset as a founder
I
in my business.
I love that so, so much, Lauren, because so many of us, especially as business owners, for the exact reason you just said, have a scarcity mindset. And you're
Yep.
thinking, like, oh, they got that, so I don't get it. When really, like you
Yep.
said, it should be, oh, they got that, I can get that, and probably even better. And so it's like, if that exists, it exists in like so many other ways, 10 to 100 fold what you're seeing right there in this one example. And I think that and that mindset, I truly believe, is what like brings those opportunities to you too, because what you focus on
Yeah.
grows. And if you're focused on this abundant mindset and how there's so much opportunity out there for you and how like you're meant to live this fantastic, amazing life, then like that's what you'll start to see, versus like that closed-minded, small, scarcity mindset where you're like, this got taken, I can't do that. Like that's all gonna just like manifest then in your day to day and in your business. Love that. Thank you for sharing
Yes.
that.
Of course. And let like anyone who's listening to kind of like take that to maybe take a minute today to like check your mindset and kind of like evaluate yourself, think what you're thinking, think how it's influencing you. I think this is a good opportunity to maybe look at that today.
Yeah, and a really
Rapid
good,
fire. Oh, sorry.
just real quick, so sorry.
Sorry.
A really good book on abundance is called The Abundance Project. I can't remember who wrote it, but highly recommend. We can leave a note in the show notes too if people are interested in reading that one.
I was gonna say we could like link it in the description too. So if you're listening, hopefully it's already linked in there for you. I love that though. That could be maybe another Radiant Book Club book in the future.
Hmm.
Um, and as we're kind of getting to the end here, I wanted to just kind of have you reflect rapid fire on looking back to starting over as a founder, everything you know now, 10 plus years of Radiant. What would you do differently for someone out there who's listening who might be at the beginning of their journey?
Yeah, so I think this is a perfect chance for me to kind of do our framework at Market Like a
Yeah.
Mother fashion. So, I mean, I would definitely say keep your finger on the pulse of your finances. Like, you have to ask questions. If you're not the one managing it right now in your own business, like, be asking questions to whoever's managing it. If you have a bookkeeper or financial advisor, make sure you're staying informed with the key details that really give you a sense of the health of your business. For sure, 100%, if you're in a partnership, or even if you just have like an executive team, just make sure that all of those roles are clearly defined and that everyone knows what they're doing. And like, if you don't have that already, create it as you go, but like still create it, right? So don't just be
Yeah.
like, oh, they'll be doing this stuff over here and I'm kind of doing this stuff, but like, no, like crystal clear. Um, and then I think, like we talked about, be really intentional about hiring and making sure you're doing the right things. You're doing your due diligence, calling references, having those working interviews, and fire quickly. Like, if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. If they consistently underperform, you've gone through a performance improvement plan. If they are toxic to the culture, if they just really, there's these key things. If you feel it in your gut, like if you're a gut person like me, then like take steps to again, either improve that or let them go. I think that's huge because they're a huge cost to your company. And then, with the mindset thing, definitely invest in your mental health. I think it's really, really important to prevent burnout, to prevent resentment, to really stay focused on like these positive mindsets that we talked about, the abundance mindset, the opportunity, and just making sure that you have a balance that I know that we put a lot of time in, we put a lot of hours into our business, but like having some of the joy you're getting from life come from outside of work, because like yes, work is important, and this is our way to bring great things into the world, but it's not everything. There are other things outside of this, and making sure you don't lose touch with that as you're like working your 12-hour shifts day after day. Definitely get outside, get some sunshine, spend time with loved ones, because I also think that's what brings in some of the other creative juices and ideas. It's like having other perspectives and thinking outside of the box by enjoying other parts of life.
I love that. And I feel like that's all such good advice, for anyone listening, whether they're at like those very early days as a founder, they're wanting to be a founder, or, they're a few years in and kind of need to, reevaluate what they're doing. So I think that's all such good advice. And thank you for sharing everything, Karen, and kind of taking us through your mistakes. I know that probably wasn't, the easiest thing to reflect on. So I'm sure everyone listening appreciates that too.
Well, thank you, Lauren, for your thoughtful questions.
Of course. And before you guys go, make sure you check out our website so you can learn more about Radiant and how we help brands grow with intention. You can follow us on social. We are on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you loved today's episode, you could stream it on all the platforms. We're on Apple and Spotify, and we even have video versions on YouTube. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And until next time, stay
Stay
radiant.
radiant.